Joan Crawford spent decades building one of the most powerful images in Hollywood. Elegant, controlled, untouchable. To the public, she looked like the perfect Hollywood star. But inside her home, her children experienced something very different, because behind the fame and the carefully managed image was a family struggling beneath the pressure of a woman the world thought it already understood. Her 4 children would spend years living inside that pressure, some of them breaking under it, some defending it, and one of them telling the world exactly what it had looked like from the inside. And decades later, that family story still hasn't fully disappeared. The image she built and what it cost to maintain it. Joan Crawford did not simply become famous. She constructed her fame deliberately, piece by piece, with total control over every detail. Born Lucille Fay LeSueur in 1904 in San Antonio, Texas, she had nothing Hollywood expected its stars to arrive with. No family connections, no formal training, no inherited beauty that didn't require extraordinary effort to maintain. What she had was will, an absolute, almost frightening determination to become someone the world could not ignore. She understood instinctively what the camera wanted, and she gave it that thing, relentlessly. She wore white gloves. She answered fan mail personally. She made being Joan Crawford look effortless. In reality, it required enormous effort. Every interview, every appearance, every photograph carefully controlled. The Oscar she won in 1945 for Mildred Pierce, accepted from her sickbed in a staged performance of glamorous illness that her publicist helped orchestrate, is the perfect encapsulation of how she operated. Even in vulnerability, she was performing. Even in private moments, the image was being managed. But maintaining that image came with consequences inside the home. Because the same ferocious control Joan applied to her public persona did not disappear when the cameras stopped rolling. It followed her through the front door, and her children felt it in ways that would define the rest of their lives. The family behind the glamour. Joan Crawford was married 4 times, to Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Francho Tone, Philip Terry, and Alfred Steele. None of those marriages produced biological children. But Joan wanted a family with the same intensity she wanted everything else, and so she built one. She adopted Christina in 1940, arranging the adoption privately through a Los Angeles baby broker because California law at the time prohibited single women from adopting, a law she simply circumvented by completing the adoption in Nevada. She adopted Christopher in 1943 during her marriage to Philip Terry. When that marriage ended in 1946, she changed the boy's name from Philip Terry Jr. to Christopher Crawford, as if the divorce had wiped the father clean. In 1947, she adopted fraternal twins, Kathy and Cindy, whose birth mother had died of kidney failure 7 days after giving birth, having already arranged their adoption before she died. 4 children, all adopted, all given her name, all placed inside a home run by a woman for whom presentation was not optional and discipline was a form of love. Or at least that was how she understood it. To the public, Joan Crawford was the perfect Hollywood mother. She photographed beautifully with her children. She gave interviews about the importance of family. She maintained, as she maintained everything, the appearance of a domestic life that matched the image. But inside the family, the experience was far more complicated, and the complication had a name. It was Christina. Christina Crawford and the Book That Divided Hollywood. Christina Crawford grew up watching her mother manage the world's perception of her with a precision that left very little room for anything that did not fit the image. She watched the press photographs being staged. She watched the discipline inside the house, strict, specific, sometimes physical, exist alongside the warmth Joan projected for public consumption. Christina became an actress. She appeared on the soap opera The Secret Storm in New York during the late 1960s. And then something happened she never forgot. After emergency surgery forced her to miss several episodes, the producers asked Joan Crawford to step into the role temporarily while Christina recovered, to prevent the role from being recast. Joan agreed, a mother filling her ill daughter's role on a soap opera, in the very medium Christina had built her professional life in. Christina later said it felt like the defining metaphor for the entire relationship. After Joan died in May 1977, from cardiac arrest, alone in her New York apartment, having reportedly asked to be left alone because she knew she was dying and did not want the theatrics, Christina and Christopher discovered they had been disinherited. Joan's will stated they were excluded for reasons which are well known to them. She left her estate to Kathy, Cindy, and to various charities. Christopher later said that when his daughter Bonnie was born with serious health complications and he called Joan for help, she told him, "She's not my granddaughter. You were adopted." He slammed down the phone so hard he broke the receiver. That was the last conversation they ever had. In 1978, a year after Joan's death, Christina published Mommie, Dearest, a memoir that described, in specific and unflinching detail, a childhood shaped by alcoholism, emotional volatility, physical punishment, and the particular cruelty of a mother who could be warm and loving one moment and terrifying the next. The book became one of the most talked-about publications of its decade. In 1981, Faye Dunaway's portrayal of Joan in the film adaptation gave the world images that permanently altered how Joan Crawford was remembered. The wire hangers, the midnight rages, the face of glamour stripped away to reveal something much darker underneath. For the first time, the world was forced to confront a version of Joan Crawford that completely conflicted with the image Hollywood had spent decades protecting. But what the world did not immediately reckon with was that Christina's siblings had a different story to tell. But even after Mommie, Dearest shocked Hollywood, the family itself still could not agree on who Joan Crawford truly was. 4 children, 4 different memories, 1 mother. Here is the fact that makes the Joan Crawford family story genuinely complicated and more honest than most people want it to be. Christopher, who served in the U.S. Army and spent his adult life largely in silence, confirmed in interviews that he had experienced difficult treatment from his mother. He did not elaborate extensively, but he supported his sister's account in the ways that mattered. And his final conversation with Joan, about a granddaughter she refused to acknowledge as her own, tells you something specific and painful about what their relationship had become. Kathy and Cindy told an entirely different story. Kathy, who would go on to become a county commissioner in Idaho and defend her mother publicly until her death from lung cancer in 2020, said without qualification, "Our mommy was the best mother anyone ever had." She described Joan as warm, realistic, wise, and a good friend. When Christina went on a book tour for the 20th anniversary of Mommie, Dearest, and made public claims that Kathy and Cindy were not biological twins and that their adoption had been illegal, Kathy sued her for defamation. The case was settled for $5,000. Cindy, who died in 2007 at 60, lived quietly and rarely spoke to the press. When she did speak, just after the Mommie, Dearest film was released, she offered a small but telling detail about her own experience of discipline in the Crawford household. "My worst punishment," she said, "was eating cold dinner for breakfast." It was delivered not as a horror story, but as a minor inconvenience. The same household, an entirely different childhood. This is the truth that the Joan Crawford story demands you sit with: 4 children raised by the same woman, in the same house, and they emerged with memories so different they might as well have been raised by different people. Part of that difference may have come from timing. By the time Kathy and Cindy arrived, Joan's life, and perhaps her behavior, had changed. But part of it was simply the reality that even inside one family, people can experience the same parent in completely different ways. Even inside the same household, Joan Crawford's children remembered her in completely different ways. What Joan Crawford left behind. And even after Joan Crawford was gone, the arguments about who she really was never disappeared. Joan Crawford died on May 10, 1977. She was 72 years old. In her final years, she had become increasingly reclusive. The face that had defined Hollywood glamour for 5 decades had become, by her own description, too altered by age to be seen in public. She answered fan mail from her apartment. She refused visitors. She controlled, even in her withdrawal, the image she left behind. What she did not control was what came after. The estate went to Kathy, Cindy, and Charity. Christina and Christopher challenged the will and settled for a combined $55,000, a fraction of what the estate was worth, but a legal acknowledgement that the disinheritance had been contested and could not simply stand. Christopher died in 2006. Cindy died in 2007. Kathy died in 2020. Christina, who turned 85 in 2024, is the only one of Joan Crawford's 4 children still living. The debate over who Joan Crawford really was has never fully ended. The Mommie Dearest narrative, the wire hangers, the rage, the controlling perfectionism became so embedded in popular culture that it is now almost impossible to separate the woman from the caricature. Ryan Murphy's television series, Feud, which dramatized Joan's rivalry with Bette Davis, gave her back some of the complexity the caricature had removed. Jessica Lange's portrayal suggested a woman who was not simply a monster, but someone who had been shaped by her own damage into something that damaged others, someone whose need for control was inseparable from the fear that losing control would mean losing everything she had built from nothing. That is not a defense. It is not an accusation. It is an attempt to look at someone clearly. The shadow that outlasted the glamour. Joan Crawford spent her life controlling how the world saw her. And for decades, it worked. But behind the glamour and the Oscar and the carefully managed image was a family story far more painful and complicated than Hollywood ever imagined. A daughter who spent decades carrying a story the world alternately believed and dismissed. A son who went to Vietnam and came home and lived quietly and died estranged from the woman who raised him. 2 daughters who remembered a warm and loving mother and spent their lives defending her name against a sister they felt had betrayed it. And a woman at the center of all of it, ferociously talented, genuinely damaged, capable of great warmth and real cruelty, and never fully understood by anyone, including her own children. Because sometimes, the people closest to fame experience a completely different reality than the rest of the world. And even today, Joan Crawford's family remains one of Hollywood's most painful and most human family stories. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe so you never miss another one. And we want to hear from you. After hearing both sides of the story, do you think Joan Crawford was misunderstood? Or do you think her children revealed the truth? Let us know in the comments. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe so you never miss another one.